As always, today's podcast is sponsored by Fire Facilities, makers of reliable, all-American steel fire training structures built the way you train. Fire Facilities towers, burn rooms, and mobile units help you prepare to respond and survive. Like several years ago, there are certain people I can't reach out to be on the podcast. It's not that I'm intimidated, but I'm kind of like, you put people up on a pedestal. Well, you're one of those people. And the way you came into my universe was your FireX talk in 2018, which I think Snodgrass is the one that puts those together, right?
Yeah.
And I tell you what, that was incredible. It was like, I think it's about 20 minutes long. So I watched it twice, back to back. And I was like, who is this guy? I got to look him up. And of course I did. And for those listening, I have the link down in the description. I highly encourage you to not only look at this FireX talk, look at all the FireX talks, but with Rob Fisher, it was so motivating. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came to be and how you felt about doing it?
Yeah. Well, Snodgrass, he's got some crazy number that he wants to do. He wanted to do, like 3,000 of those or 1,500 of them. I don't remember exactly. The first FireX talks, my association is with Brothers in Battle. And so the first ones that were done were with Brian Olson. And he's probably, I think the last time I checked on YouTube, he's got like 45,000 or 50,000 views on search, and Cody Trestrell was on there. So the following year, they reached out and Snodgrass said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing it?" And to be honest, I don't think I really had a topic at the time. I was into mentoring and some stuff that we were doing in my department. And so I had some concepts there. I was into leadership. I was in college. And so I was finishing up my bachelor's degree and starting in my master's degree. And so everything was focused on leadership, organizational leadership. So I thought, yeah, I could piece together. And the concept of the FireX talks is just like a TED talk. Mm-hmm. You get 15, 20 minutes, do your presentation, and that's it. And so I went there. The topic of it is leading through followership. And basically it was tying the connection between leadership and followership together.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I thought, now here's how arrogant I was. A couple of years ago, I thought I came up with the best thing, like followership. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna write an article and all this. I think I realize now that I saw that several years ago, and I was like, oh, I must have just stole that from Rob Fisher. But I never did. I don't think I ever did write an article on that. But I do love the idea.
Let me just say that I didn't come up with it either. And like many things in the fire service, and this always gets talked about, at least like with my cadres, with Brothers in Battle, and County Fire Tactics, is like, we're not really creating anything new. We're just regurgitating it for a new audience. And, there's some things that change, like building construction and how fire behavior inside buildings have changed a little bit, but we're not creating anything new. So the idea of followership has been around for a long time, and I didn't create it. I think the first person, I read an article, or actually I take that back, I read a book in college, and it was by, I think her name was Barbara Kellerman, and she wrote on followership. And at the time, there wasn't much written on followership. And this is only, 6 or 7 years ago. There wasn't really much written on followership, but everything that I was finding about followership was tied to the military. And I think even in my FireX talk, one of the things I said is that the military is probably the best organization in the world when it comes to developing good followers. And it's just in their structure, how they do things. Some of my frustrations in leadership is when we skip ranks and when we fast track, and these are things that are talked about at the firehouse all the time. But the military doesn't allow you to fast track. The military doesn't allow you to skip ranks. The military spends a lot of their time and effort developing very good followers. I went to boot camp right out of high school. I got hurt while at boot camp, so I never finished. But I was at Marine Corps boot camp, and when you go to boot camp, that's the intent, is to break you down,
Mhm.
create you, to remold you into their follower. And you know, so looking at what was out there, the books, there really wasn't much. And then I started pulling a lot of stuff from the military, and just the idea that the fire service is a paramilitary environment, that it was a good um, it was a good association, connection with the military, and that's why I kind of ran with it.
You could be more right too, because it's funny how I was in the Air Force, so we're a little tougher than Marines. I think we can all agree on that.
All
Sorry.
right, pushing a broom or flying a jet, which one did you do?
I was just a fireman, but I cleaned a lot of bathrooms, but I did them for my country. So that's
Yeah, I
different, right?
gotcha. Well, I
Um,
appreciate your service.
back at you. But what's funny is exactly what you said. And people that are listening to this right now that have been in the military, have gone to boot camp, know within a 24-hour period, you are no longer the person you were. In a 24-hour period, they shave your head, they give you clothes, they tell you where to sleep, how to eat, how to brush your teeth, everything. And it sounds intimidating and scary. It is. But when you get the other side of it and you look back, it's an amazing infrastructure they've got to take anybody. And I don't care who it is, they'll take anybody and they can, more times than not, create a great follower, which in turn, like you, I believe makes a good leader. I don't think you're going to see a good leader that wasn't a good follower. So I think that's an amazing thing. And so I'm the kind of guy that I like being told what to do. I guess that's why I've been married twice, but I like being told what to do. I liked the military. I did. I liked, hey, you're going to go here, you're going to do this, you're going to be this guy, you're going to wear this clothes. It made it so easy for me. That's just the way I was. Fast forward to leaving the Air Force as a firefighter. I went to Lexington, Kentucky as a firefighter for 8 years. And it was great, great department, great people, and a little looser, obviously, paramilitary. But I loved it. I just would rather be the person being told what to do, expectations and goals being set for me to do my job. So I fell right into that. And you're right. I mean, so many people come to the fire department and they try to change their fire department. In the military, you're not going to change. You're not going to join the Marines and say, what we ought to do? If we get up around 8 o'clock, I think we'll be more productive. You'll never hear that. So I think it is a fantastic groundwork for followers and leaders. More times than not in the fire service, everybody wants to talk about leadership. Read this book about leadership, blah, blah, blah. But I really believe before you can even think about that, you do need to be a good follower. And sometimes I think being a good follower can be more difficult than being a good leader. What do you
Oh,
think?
yeah, absolutely. um, oh, if anybody follows some of the stuff on social media that I do, and you probably kind of get the gist that I've been frustrated with leadership, that I've had to work through. And but in my class that on leadership and followership, I talk about a lot of the mistakes that I made as a leader. I'm getting ready to retire here in the next couple of months, and
Ooh, congrats.
I got a 36-year career that I'm retiring from, and I'll be honest, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I probably could have been a better follower, but part of the problem was I was growing up in an organization that was super small. I came in right after, I got hurt in the military, or I got hurt at boot camp, I should say. I came back. All I wanted to be was a firefighter since I was a young kid. And so I was using the military, the Marine Corps, to kind of fill the gap between 18 and about 22 years of age, because you just figured you're not going to get a career in the fire service until you're in your 20s. And so I came back, and in the area that my parents were living, there was a fire department that had a resident program. Basically, you lived at the fire station, and they had a couple of paid guys, and gal. We had one of the first female firefighters in our county, and I can't say in the state of Washington for sure, but she was in the first handful of female firefighters in our state. But we were such a small organization, so kind of the key of leadership and the key of followership is development, and creating programs that help develop future leaders, right? Well, I didn't necessarily have that to my growth, and so I became a company officer early on, after I got hired, and I had a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy. I loved training. I wanted to go and be better, but I just wasn't being brought up. I mean, it was like a kind of like a single kid without a dad. I didn't have that father figure to help guide me along the way, and so I made a lot of mistakes as a company officer earlier in my career. And so, you know, I absolutely agree with the fact that if you can form and develop good followers, you're going to have great leaders in the end. And it just, just so I when I came into the fire service or when I came into my department, we just didn't have the best leadership ahead of us or on top of me to help develop me into a good leader. And so it's kind of like learning on my own, going out and when you're in your 20s, late 20s, I think I got promoted to company officer when I was 25 or 27 years old, somewhere in there. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, and some of those mistakes will come back to haunt you later on in your career, especially when individuals that you were working with were firefighters, and then they became your boss later on.
Hmm. It's funny because much like you, for a myriad of reasons, I probably wasn't as interested as I should have been younger on to be a better firefighter, better leader, and all that. I guess I was sort of late to the game to really jump in with both feet. You'd mentioned earlier skipping ranks. I skipped ranks. I don't like it. I don't recommend it. Another good friend of mine in my department skipped ranks as well. Mine was I put in for the training officer position. That came along with the battalion chief rank. I didn't have a battalion. I wasn't a battalion chief. And I regretted not going through the ranks and just, even if it was as a training officer. So if you look at my shirts, they always say training officer. They don't have my rank because I want to be a training officer. I care less about rank. But I agree with you. And because of that, I was really struggling to find, I felt like I started behind the ball. So I really wanted up my leadership game. So, man, I was reading everything I could get my hands on. You know, let's think, Jared Sergi, Josh Chase, of course, Viscuso, all of them. And I couldn't find my in with leadership. I really couldn't. I was like, these are their stories, their experiences, and I can't relate to them. So this podcast kind of came from that sort of an indirect way. One day I was just, again, struggling. I was like, man, if I'm expected to be this leader, because I skipped ranks, right? And I shouldn't have done that. Well, I mean, I had no choice, but I felt like I had to turbo boost up like 6 years, 7 years. So I was reading everything and I just couldn't do it. Well, I decided one day, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was exampleship, right? If you're a good example, that's a good place to start. You want to be a good example to the people that are of lower rank than you. So I broke it down into three things: pride, training, and physical fitness. I figured if you work on all three things just a little bit every day, you become a better firefighter, you become a better leader. Hence 3-point firefighter. Those are my 3 points. So I wrote an article about it called that. And for me, then I revisited all the leadership articles and all the leadership books, and it made sense to me. I had to find my way into leadership. And I had to realize that leadership is an art. It's not a science. What works for you may not work for me. What works for me may not work for you. And you can have Salka telling you everything, and it's brilliant stuff. But if it doesn't affect you, if it doesn't, connect with you, it's a waste of time. So I've spent a lot of time trying to catch up and be a better leader. But I don't know who you found to help you get over that obstacle, but how do you feel about you being the person that helps people get over that obstacle? You are the one how many people have you never met or never will meet that you've affected their life in the fire service to make them a better follower and a better leader, and also make them a better department and a better community? What kind of pressure is that?
Yeah. Well, let me clarify before we go back to that. You might have to remind me the question because when I say skipping ranks, every organization is a little bit different, and so use yours as an example. To become the training officer in your organization, it comes with the rank of battalion, and you might have come from firefighter from somewhere else, and you had the right credentials to be a training officer, but you have no control over what the rank is. And so, first of all, I would say that if the organization had a structure of ranks that led to the next rank, like going from lieutenant to captain, captain to battalion, battalion to deputy chief or division chief or whatever it is, you should follow those. The military requires it, right?
Yes.
But but I will say there are some exceptional people that can skip rank. It's a general rule that you shouldn't skip rank, because oftentimes you're not developed along the way, and you don't have the foresight of a lot of things. And I'll use me as an example. I didn't have the right upbringing. I wasn't mature enough as a 20-year-old. I wasn't seeking this information out. I wasn't a college student then. I didn't really get into college until after I had promoted, and I was probably in my 30s. But there are some exceptional individuals that recognize certain things. And the one thing that I would tell you that makes for the greatest leaders is humility. And so when you are able to see those things, and you're able to use humility when you're talking with others, because you've skipped ranks, when you can apply that, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'm humble, and another thing to actually be humble. But when you can apply it, then that's when you can start breaking down barriers, and that you can be effective as a leader when you skip ranks. I mean, there's other things that go along with humility. Example, as you said, listening, the ability to be able to listen to people, to be able to, to put action forward and take from your feedback. I mean, probably the biggest thing that all leaders need to work on is accepting feedback and really listening to it and doing something with it. Now, when you apply all those things, you probably can skip rank. You can probably work outside the structure, but it's a very small group of individuals that actually can do that. Most of us need to be developed. I mean, we're not just born to be really good leaders. I disagree with the fact that you're a born leader. You're right. Developed into being a good leader. So, yes. So you're going to your question about the impact. One of the things I think that when we were exchanging information beforehand, one of the things you want to talk about was, how I saw social media. And I would say social media has been great for the American Fire Service. I got to start in a time period when, social media was when the internet was just kind of coming through, and social media, the way that we see it today, just didn't exist. And so to share information, you had to go to a conference or some type of training. You had to, get documents, get books, and it just didn't work. And today, when we look at like the impact social media has, it has done a lot to shape the American Fire Service. We'll just use UL, and it's in the last decade what it has done to help grow the American Fire Service. That wouldn't exist if it wasn't for social media. Now, social media has got some bad things, and I've I've participated in being a critic, a keyboard captain, and blowing people up on social media, and that just comes with maturity and with something new like social media, you learn to be better at it and know when to step in and how to have some dialogue. I mean, if you're really wanting to change something in the American Fire Service, you just can't be blowing everybody up. It goes back to that 10 pounds of pressure 100% of the time, that if you're going to make change, you got to let things simmer a little bit. You gotta be able to open the conversation and have back and forth dialogue. I mean, a great example is our political climate in America today. It's a disaster, because I don't care which side you're on, or how many different groups you think there are in America when it comes to the politics, but we are a disaster because we do not listen to one another. We just think that our position is right, and so the same thing has happened in the American Fire Service. Now, one of the things that I had hoped, as I got longer into the career, and I knew that retirement was coming within a decade or so, that's when I realized that I don't want to say I want to leave a legacy, because I think that's just too big of a word. But I just want to be able to say that I had an impact on firefighters, at least in my region. And if I was able to have an impact on firefighters outside the region and across the nation and wow, I mean, even across, international waters, that's awesome. And I feel great about it. And one of the things that when I've met firefighters from Germany and all across the world and firefighters all across the nation is like, I just try to share my experiences and I've made a lot of mistakes and just try to get people not to repeat my mistakes and to build off of whatever I can share with them and to make sure that they're passing it on and paying it forward and sharing with others to make the American Fire Service a great organization.
The one thing that I've noticed, like I say, this season 4, before I started the podcast, which if you knew me prior to this, you would never think I'd be the guy to do the podcast ever. It was kind of a sort of a calling, but I remember thinking about it and I started thinking about all the people I'd like to have on it. And I had this image in my head that I would be talking to, say, Aaron Fields, right? And because I got to talk to him a couple of times on here. And here's what I assumed. He would say, I'm Aaron Fields. I've been doing fire service stuff perfectly since the day I came in. That wasn't the case. He's like, oh my gosh, the mistakes I made. And everybody since then is very humble and they're very honest. And that's, you talk about leadership. Honesty is a big part of it, right? Just like you said, no, I've done nothing but make mistakes, and I'm trying to stop others from making the mistakes that I made. That's how I feel. And that has made me feel so much more comfortable doing this podcast because I've never met a firefighter yet on here that has said, oh yeah, I got it right. They're like, oh my God, I did this, I did that, I did this. And it makes me feel better. And I think the people that listen to this podcast, I think it makes them feel better too. Because if they're like me, they see people up here that are, FDIC and they're on all the conferences and they have this impression in their head like, oh, they've always been that good. And chances are, no, it's been a lot of struggle, a lot of hard work. But the one thing I think everybody has that's been on here is they don't quit. It's that, I think that's another defining trait. It's like, okay, I've made mistakes. Let's move forward. I own those mistakes. Let's move forward. So I think that's a great thing. You talked about in your FireX talk about, and you've touched on it a little bit, there's a difference in training and development. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, you know, I'll use an analogy, and I think on the FireX talk I talk about training is acquiring a skill and being able to development is being able to take that skill and apply problems to it and being able to being able to work through the problem for success. But another analogy, and I'm into music, and I would say like training in music, when you're a musician, is learning your scales or rudiments or playing a piece by yourself and practicing that piece. That's training. But when you've been developed is kind of a culmination where you bring together a band that's going to jam together, and your ability to be able to adapt in an environment. So like utilizing jazz as an example, I mean, they might be in a certain key they start off in, and as they're jamming together and they're soloing, that is development. That's taking all of these pieces of training together and being able to work with a very dynamic environment, such as playing music or on the fire ground. Another example would be in football, quarterback works on certain plays with passing, but very often the pocket, he basically is his offensive line or hers, if it's a female fire or female quarterback. But when the offensive line breaks down, the quarterback has to scramble, gets out of the pocket. Well, that is not a designed play. That is adapting to a very dynamic environment and changing as it goes. And it goes to the receivers as well. It's not just the quarterback. The receivers, the play is broken, and now in the route that they were running, they have to adjust their route, and they're now scanning the field and figuring out what they can do, how they can shake their defender. That's all about development. And I think that in the American Fire Service, we can take firefighters and we can show them skills. You know, recruit academy, we're just going over skill, over skill, over skill, over skill. Masking up. This is probably one of the big things. Just doing your mask up and trying to get under 10 seconds or get, you know, right around that 10-second mark. All of our probies are, you know, in my department, out of the academy, we're shooting for under 15 seconds that they're mask up time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, how do you do that? I just tell them, just got to keep on masking up. Don't try to hurry. Just keep on practicing the skill, going over that skill. That is training. And then when we eventually, over a period of time, it gets better, and now your speed increases. And you don't have to try to hurry. You just by doing it, it just becomes natural, and your speed increases. Well, the development side of that, that's just one piece of training. The development side of it is, what impact does it have on the fire ground? What impact does it have on your ability that if you got into trouble, you know, and you can get your mask on your face in 10 seconds versus you haven't done that skill, you know? That's all part of the development of a good firefighter.
Right. It's funny too, because some of that stuff is seen, bunker drills, mask up drills are seen as something you do in the academy and you do your first year. Me personally, I kind of think you should be doing it all the time. Maybe transition to getting all your stuff on as it hangs on the fire truck, like with your radio and everything. I made a book for our new recruits that over a year's time, once they get on the shift work, they have this book of stuff they got to do so many times in such a period of time, starting saws, taking saws apart, throwing ladders, masking up, everything, you know, all the stuff to get that muscle memory. Well, I had a captain come up to me and said, well, you have them doing at least 20 bunker drills and mask up drills in a year, or the rest of the year, which was like 8 months. Why do we do that? They already know how to put their stuff on. And I'm like, wait a minute, you don't understand this. Now look at the community, right? Imagine when anybody dies in a fire, there's about 10 seconds before they're dead that they're not dead, meaning we can give them that 10 seconds if we learn to put our gear on efficiently and fast, right? We're not going to make up time on the road, not that much, not without, you know, the risk versus gain there. So yeah, we all should be doing it, you know, and we should be doing it this certain way. And the light went off in his head. And he was like, oh, you know what? I've never even thought about that. Yeah. So right before somebody dies, you know, 10 seconds before somebody's dead, they're still alive. Let's give them our 10 seconds. That's what we have to do. And we have to work that way. And we have to train our people that way, that it's not about us. You know, I'd like to think it's about us, but it's about them. Every time we come to work, it's for them. It's for our community. I have never, and I'm not stroking you on this one. If you listen to my other podcasts, you're going to hear me say this. And I've said it a bunch of times. I love that part of the country you're in. I never wanted to go there, but I teach for the ISFSI, so I'm very fortunate to travel all over the country. 1 year, I get a class out in, I don't know if it's Tacoma, Spokane, whatever is out there. Not only is the place beautiful, the culture in the fire service. Now, this is 4 or 5 years of doing this now and going back out there over and over. I just got back from Idaho, Spokane, right? You know, right by Boise or Idaho. But I see the same thing in every department I go. In your area, Oregon and Washington, I see a community first approach at every fire department I've taught in. I can't say that I've seen that everywhere. I haven't seen horrible fire departments, don't get me wrong. So what I want to come back to something too about that, but I want to ask you why we're here. What is it about that area that makes such great firefighters and makes that culture so good?
It's real. This is a simple answer. Craft beer. The best beer, the best crafted beers are from the Pacific Northwest. Next question.
Well, okay, that seems simple, and I like it. So if I'm hearing you right, and I got to tell my wife this, the more beer I drink, the better a firefighter I'm going to be. Okay, let's move on. So I was out there. The first time I was out there, it was a gas. It was a Class B training tower, and I want to say it was Tacoma. I think I was in. And I was there with another instructor, Bill D'Agostino, great guy. And I noticed I was outside, Bill was inside going with the inside guys, and we rotate. Well, I noticed every single time they attacked the fire, all of a sudden they were hydraulically ventilating every time. And the first time I saw it, I was like, what are they doing? And then the next group went in, I'm like, oh, okay, they're hydraulically ventilating. And then I got to thinking, I'm like, that's a Class B prop. Well, why are they doing that for a Class B prop? There's no smoke. So Bill takes him through his rotations. When it gets to be my turn, I ask the guys there, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. I said, I notice you guys are hydraulically ventilating. What's up with that? It's Class B. He goes, oh, no. We do that every fire. That's for our community. We got to make sure that they're safe. And it just, I swear, if I didn't have boots on, my socks would have flown off. And I was like, well, this is an isolated incident. Every time I go back there now, I see that quality of care for the community. Excuse me, first. It's amazing. Now, I will say this, I will take your area, Washington and Oregon, and those firefighters, and put you up against Texas. Who do you think would win between those Texas boys and you all? Because that's another good group of people.
Well, obviously, the Pacific Northwest firefighters created a lot of the stuff that they're doing today, and Texas is just borrowing it from us. But I got a lot of good friends that work in the Texas area. You know, Kyle Romagus, Mo Davis, Clyde Gordon. I mean, just the list goes on. Zach King. Man, I could just go on and on and on.
Especially that Houston area, yeah.
Well, I mean, to your point about the Pacific Northwest, there's a couple things I think that had an impact. Early on, when I went to the academy in '88, the state of Washington had one single fire academy. The ones that didn't attend the academy were the big cities, for the most part, generally speaking. So Seattle and Tacoma and Spokane were the three big cities in the state. But everybody else attended a single state fire academy for developing or for recruit training. And in the late 90s, a firefighter, well, I should say a company officer and a couple of firefighters and other company officers had basically taken over the curriculum at the State Fire Academy. John Tanaka, Mike Josepatis, we called him Juice, Richie Schroner. I mean, there was a number of guys that were up there. Well, they were starting to take a lot of the idea of, you know, how much fire capability you have with your nozzle, you know, by utilizing the NFA formula in reverse. So saying, taking your gallons per minute and being able to determine how much square feet of fire you have.
Right.
So what they were training the recruits to be is, you need to know about your capabilities and limitations. And so that's just one example. So to your point about this hydraulic ventilation, and I can't say that because of Tacoma or what, but one of the elements the recruits were just driven into their head every time we did live fire was something we called Sven. So when you would get to the
Uncle
fire
Sven.
room, when you get to the fire room, you'd want to meet Uncle Sven, and that is S was search, V was ventilation, that was done by hydraulic ventilation, E was extension, and then N was notify. So notify command that you've made the fire and everything. So for the idea of hydraulic ventilation and how that had an impact, I mean, like I would contribute, or I would say I would attribute that back to kind of the training that was going on in the late 90s. And then it developed, you know, Aaron Fields went to the State Fire Academy because he was with another organization before he became part of Seattle Fire. Mm-hmm. And there were things that we did wrong at the State Fire Academy as well. I mean, there was a lot of things that we did wrong. But I think what it did is it brought, you know, it had this mindset of being a educated firefighter. You know, you don't need to be stupid and knuckle dragger. You need to be smart. You need to be able to think on your own. We were separating I guess, decentralizing command down to the firefighter. And we encourage the recruits to be thinking recruits. And since then, I mean, all the recruit academies that I've been involved in, and kind of the state concept has changed. And now the county that I'm in, we have our own recruit academy. But a lot of the best instructors that were at the State Fire Academy were from the county that I was working in. And so we just basically created our own. Well, what we do is we have the same structure, like paramilitary concept with recruits and holding them accountable for certain things. But we also tell them, we don't want you to be a robot. We want you to be able to think on your own and adapt, which goes back to that ability of, we're going away from training and getting into development, your ability to be able to adapt to rapidly changing fire ground and be able to do things. Now, I'm not saying that they're just going to go and do whatever they want, but they know there are certain things that they can do on their own. Example would be, in most cases, the company officer has to do some type of 360. We have a working fire in a dwelling. The firefighter stretches the line. Now, are they waiting to be told to charge the line? Are they waiting to be told to force the door? Are they waiting to be told to mask up? Are they waiting to be told to apply some water from the exterior and, in a transitional type position? No, these firefighters are learning to be able to do those things, make those decisions on their own. And when the company officer gets around, typically in most cases, they're already masked up. They've already forced the door. They've already done a defensive search just inside the door for victims at the door. They probably have already applied water in the interior of the structure, trying to reset the fire in some fashion. Well, that's all being done by the firefighters. So I think that going back to your question about the region being rich with really good firefighters, I think it stems from the concept from the State Fire Academy with these individuals that were there and that were, they were pushing this idea that you need to be a thinking firefighter, and they were giving us information about, how much air is consumed for one BTU, and how much capabilities do you have with your nozzle to be able to put out? So how much square footage of fire can you put out? I mean, it was incredible what we were doing back in the 90s. And I got very lucky to be able to be associated with the group up there at State Fire Academy, instructing with them, and then it goes into the mid 2000s, and now we've got an area where social media is coming into play. We have some great firefighters in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, I can't even begin naming them. Cody Trestrell and McWilliams and Brian Olson, and I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. Aaron Fields. And I would say the cool thing is that nobody really competed with one another. We were very supportive. And I think that's where maybe there's a difference in our region versus other regions, is that a great example is how Brothers in Battle came to be. We all attended the same forcible entry class that was taught in Seattle by Josh Materi and another guy by the name of Coy Wilson. Coy's a captain with Stockton Fire, and a couple other instructors, Tommy Hofflin, who's a captain with Seattle Fire right now. But they were teaching the class. Cody Trestrell and many of the members of Brothers in Battle, we were all in this class together as students. And Cody and his group started kind of Brothers in Battle with a few individuals, and they were teaching forcible entry. And Cody has experience that he brought back from FDNY. And then the other group, which we call the Mountain Division, out of Idaho, Brian Olson and the group out there, they were teaching forcible entry. Well, what was funny is Brothers in Battle was going into Idaho to teach classes, and I don't even remember the name of their group, but Mountain Division was coming into Washington to teach classes. One day they said, "Hey, we should probably get together. We could prevent this whole going back and forth." At no time, I mean, they all knew each other. They all knew they supported one another, and this kind of is a good lesson in leadership is not destroying somebody that has a different approach, or is supporting, being a very supportive leader. And I think that just added to our ability to be able to, in this region, to be able to create some really good instructors that share some really good information that are all around the nation, actually all around the world, teaching today. Scott Corrigan, I mean, the list just goes on and on and on.
It does. And I joked earlier about Houston, but you could talk about saying about Houston. There's all these names that are I call them landscapers, changing the landscape of the fire department, the fire service, I should say. And there's just so many of them. But what you said, two things got me. One was the secret sauce being how you raise new probies, how you bring them in, and how you train them to be free. In the 90s, especially in the 90s, that's when I got in the fire service, man. And it was do what you're told and shut up. Now, it wasn't bad because, well, of course, it was military. And then I went to Lexington. It was very similar. It wasn't hateful or anything. It was just that was the culture. So if the idea of having a brand new person be able to free think or do stuff on his own, to me, that's alien. I see that more and more today. So you guys were definitely cutting edge. That comes to mind. The second thing was the culture you were creating. You created a good culture for these new guys to come up into and to work. And I think that probably is a lot to it. I'm not kidding. Every time I go over there, when I do my bidding, when I get emails like, hey, there's a class in Washington, class in Oregon, whatever, I usually fill that thing out the second I get it. And I'm not saying I undercut my bid a little bit to go there, but I'm not afraid to do that if I had to. If I didn't get a bid, I just love that area. It really rejuvenates me. And I always wonder if the people there appreciate where they're at and what they're doing compared to the rest of the United States.
Yeah, I would say I teach with all of these guys, and we just feel blessed that we have such a great career, and we feel blessed to be a part of great cadres and the ability to be able to share information. And we're out on the road teaching. Everybody enjoys teaching. Everybody enjoys each other's time. I mean, it's just super. So I can tell you that all of the Pacific Northwest guys that I'm teaching with, they do appreciate their position and how things go. And I just to go back a little bit, like my recruit academy was like the militaristic style.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't put your mask on without being told. And when I came into the fire service, or I should say when I got promoted, that was basically the way that my fire department was. You didn't get off the rig as a firefighter unless you were told by the company officer. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't grab any tools. There were no tool and job assignments, and as I started to kind of look out into the fire service, and I used a lot of FDNY, and I got beat up all the time by members in my organization, like, oh, you want to be with FDNY? You want to be an FDNY guy? I'm like, no. What I'm learning is that I use FDNY as like an older brother. I'm learning from my older brother how to do certain things. And yeah, I don't have a 5 or a 6 person engine company and a 7 person truck company. I'm working with 2 and 3 person companies. But what they were doing that I thought was, and it ties to this whole kind of adult learner thing that we were doing at the academy, is it was getting firefighters, giving them the ability to think on their own and figure out. So by telling them, here's our tool and job assignments. When I worked on the ladder truck, when we go to the roof for ventilation, I didn't have to tell them, grab this, grab that. They just got off the rig with the appropriate tools. It made us efficient. We were fast. Mm-hmm. And then it developed them as future leaders. So there's that piece of the puzzle there that they were thinking on their own. And to go back to the academy, we called an adult learning environment. I think there's got to be a good balance between, the paramilitary approach and the adult learning environment. You can't have one or the other. It's got to be balanced, right? Mm-hmm. And by developing these adult learners, or having that idea that they're adult learners, to do that, you have to have, and this is one of the things for leadership that I lecture on, you have to have psychological safety. And meaning that the follower, in this case a recruit or a firefighter, has to feel comfortable questioning leadership. Well, that's a problem that we have in all of the American fire service. And it's not every leader, but there's a lot of leaders out there that do not like to be questioned, that do not like the idea. I mean, I've heard it coming up through the fire service. Why does this generation always ask questions? Why can't they just do what they're being told? It's like, well, one, they're a different generation. They do things a little bit different. And we have social media. They have the ability to be able to find out if you're bullshitting them or not, right? Back in the day, you could say this is the way it is because it's this way. Well, nobody really had the ability back in the 60s to be able to look it up and go, no, Fisher's full of shit. But now they do. So now as a leader, you better be good with your information, and you better be more open to the questions, and you better be more open to saying, you know what, I don't know, but I tell you what, we'll figure it out. So we created we created a lot of psychological safety for the recruits. And then, in my organization, I talked a little bit about mentoring. And what we did is we created mentorship for our recruits. So they'd come out of the academy, they'd come into probation. And then what we did is we got rid of the idea of the company officer being mentors, and we made firefighters. Those that, and this goes back to that piece of not skipping rank and having a good understanding of what they've been through. Those that had gone through their program, very similar academy, if not the exact same academy, went through the same probation, similar if not the same, and they were their mentors. So, and they weren't there to give them all the answers. They were there to go like, I know how you feel. I know you're tired because you're studying all night. I know you're getting up early to make coffee and to do cleaning or whatever it is, but I'm going to tell you, these are the reasons why we're doing it. That in turn created great leadership. And that kind of goes back to the whole concept of followership into leadership, and that, that if you become a good follower and you learn to be a good follower, you will be a great leader. And that's how we did it.
It's amazing. I tell you what, I'm going to shift gears real quick. I'm telling you one short story, very short, and then we're going to come right back.
This generation doesn't know how to shift gears. So be careful when you use that term.
But yes. But see, you and I are probably close. Gen X, I'm taking it. You Gen X?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's my quick story. Many years ago, my grandfather passed away. He left me 3 things. He left me an old fishing hat he used to wear when he took me fishing. I didn't like fishing, so I threw that away. He left me a Morgan silver dollar, which I checked just recently is worth a whopping $7. So I don't give a crap about that. Now, the third thing he gave me, I use quite often, and I need to now. He gave me his old man prostate. All this to say, I got to piss. Give me 2 seconds and I'll be right back.
I'm going to go too.
All right. Pee break.
2 hours later.
All right. Whew. That's a long story just to tell you got to piss, right? Grandfather never gave me any of those things. Couple quick things. I want to go back to what you said. I'm getting a little excited about it. So you talked about how you're you're making the psychological safety, right? Or you're letting them know that they have a voice, basically. So almost everything that I've done that I've had any modicum of success has been based on a gigantic screw up I've done recently before that. Mine was training brand new firefighters. And there's this one group, there were 6 of them. And I called them my Super 6. And it was one of the best classes I ever got to teach, brand new recruits. And I was struggling with this one person, this one guy who's a fantastic human being, a fantastic firefighter. And I wasn't mad at him. I just couldn't understand why he asked why all the time. Everything was why with him. So I forget exactly what we were doing, but I remember he asked me why, and I'd had it. And I punished him. I said, you go take this axe and you repaint it, or whatever I did. It was stupid. It was horrible. That night I go home and it bugs me to no end. And it hit me. I'm like, why am I so mad? Well, because I didn't know the answer. My ego was blocking me from being a good training officer. So I went back and talked to him, and I don't know if you can see, but right behind me, that's the first article I ever had published, and it's called The Generation Gap. After that incident, I started to consume everything I could about generations. And I wrote that article sort of as a reminder to me that this particular generation wants to know why. And if I can't answer why, I don't need to be a training officer. I need to figure out the why. So all this to say is I had to learn the hard way that each generation is different. Now, I had an older boss at the time, wonderful guy, but he was a little limited on what he thought of generations. To him, it didn't exist. For him, he would say, they joined us, we didn't join them. If they don't like how we do it, they can leave. I came at it from an approach of what's best for this department. My ego is not the best for this department. I can take time to learn the whys, or like you said earlier, hey, I don't know right now, but let me figure it out and I'll get back to you. So when you said all that, I was like, oh, just a reminder of all the mistakes I made with trying to understand generations. And I see it every day. I see older firefighters that are so down on the younger generation. They were the younger generation at some point. We all were, and if you're going to condemn an entire generation based on your interaction with 1 or 2 people, and you're not willing to learn the why, learn how to handle a group of kids like that. I say kids, I'm 55, so 20-year-olds. I thought that was a very valuable lesson that I had to teach myself. It was unfortunate how it came to be, but I learned how to handle a little bit better the different generations, which also involves listening as well. But that made me think of that. The other thing I want to go back to is the Brothers in Battle. So Brothers in Battle is something that I think every firefighter has heard of or had a class from. So I got their website up right now, brothersinbattle.com. I hope everybody goes there and looks at it. But here's the amazing part. If you go to cadre and you go down to instructors, holy cow. You talk about a who's who of landscapers in the fire service. There's so many of them. I don't even know how to start. So I want everybody to check it out. Brothersinbattle.com. Click on cadre and go to instructors. And also now I've been to this website several times, but I've never hit Fire Library. I don't know why, but I finally did. Holy cow, there's a lot of resources there. The Book of Andy, FDNY, forcible entry. There's so FireX talk. So I encourage everybody listening to go to Brothers in Battle, check out their classes, their instructors, their free resources. It's amazing. It reminds me, it's very similar to me as Romagus's Bro Drive. It's just there to share. It's great brotherhood. With that, I do want to talk to you about your young officers on fire. This is an amazing thing here. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So again, going back to the whole social media thing, we had talked earlier about my interest in mentoring and leadership. And in 2010, we had a probie class of 18 basically get done with probation. They got hired on in our organization in 2008. And so I wanted to do something that kind of helped. We had a really high intensity probation. And then basically they just fell off the face of the earth. As soon as they were done with probation, it's like, hey, go to your company and there you have it. And so wanted to try to keep something together. So we started doing some mentoring, me and a handful of other company officers that were into this concept. And we started mentoring a couple of firefighters, and we had projects we did. We did studies of line of duty deaths. We talked about leadership. They did presentations. We had book reading sessions. So we would pick a book and we'd read and we'd digest it and discuss it. And so it worked out really well. And then at the time I had, I still have one of my best buddies. He worked at Starbucks. He was a director at Starbucks. And so I got a connection with Starbucks, and we went to Starbucks because the main office is in Seattle. So the group of us went down there and we got to meet a bunch of vice presidents and about innovation and go through a bunch of different meetings. And so we tied everything together. And it's like, I wanted to span this corporate world idea and the fire service and the mentoring. I was just trying to piece this all together. My wife worked for Philips Medical, which the Philips light bulb, and they do medical and everything. So she was in she was in the corporate world on a global scale with 200,000 employees or whatever number that Philips has. And so they had mentoring. So I'm looking at the mentoring that Starbucks was doing, looking at the mentoring that Philips was doing, and I looked at the mentoring that we were doing in the fire service, and they were all a little bit different, or I should say they were different. And so that led to this working on this mentoring piece, and on social media, and I, and when we first got together and we started talking about it, I'm like, I don't remember when I first met Ryan, but the co-founder of Young Officers on Fire is Ryan Selleck. And Ryan was one of my recruits at the State Fire Academy. And that was the first time that I met him. One day, Ryan, I get this cold call from Ryan, and I'm working as a battalion in our East Battalion. And he's like, hey, I'd love to come and do a ride along if you wouldn't mind. I'd just like to come over and chat with you and talk to you about leadership and everything. Well, that created this connection between him and I on mentoring. And one of the lessons that we learned in our mentoring group session is that you don't pick your mentee. I mean, as a mentor, I don't go, I'm going to mentor you.
Right.
I was like, the relationship that's developed is from basically it's mentee focused. The individual looking to get mentored is the one that picks their mentor. And then it's upon the mentor and the mentee to work on the relationship together. And that's true mentorship. Well, So Ryan had reached out to me, and this relationship was being built, and Ryan had created a page on Facebook that he called Young Officers on Fire. And he said, "Hey, Rob, would you mind just jumping on there and liking my page and participating in some of the things that I'm posting in?" And later he said, "Your social media connections, it would be great for Young Officers on Fire." Well, I jumped on there, and social media attention started increasing, and then from there we decided we wanted to take this next level. We created a conference. This May is going to be our third conference that we're doing. We used to call it the Right in the Right Seat Conference, and now it's called the West Coast Leadership Conference, May 6th through the 8th in Spokane, Washington, which you've been to Spokane.
Mm-hmm.
And so now part of this organization, YoungOfficersOnFire.com, we're getting away from Facebook because not everybody is on Facebook. And we're going back to just having a web page, and we're going to start working on a YouTube presence, and still have some Facebook connection, but we're going to go this other route. But basically, we have quarterly meetings. I got one tonight, and we have a guest lecturer that comes in. You register for the quarterly meeting. We have the guest lecturer. Tonight's guest lecturer is going to be Ben Flegel, who's the president of Fools International right now, a good friend of mine. And he's going to be talking about trust and leadership. And then we'll open up the floor to just conversation. But the idea of Young Officers on Fire is to be a network, to provide a network for individuals to be able to connect with others that are similar to them, that somebody that they might have a connection with, so that they can have mentors. And because we've made the mistake of thinking that we can pick who your mentor is going to be, we now just created more of an open forum and allow it to be more organic.
That's amazing. What are some of the topics is a common topic you always bring up? It seems to be popping up.
What's a common topic that's talked about, or a common topic that's lectured on?
I'll let you surprise me.
Well, a lot of it is really it comes down to leadership. Some of the challenges leadership is dealing with people. I have yet to run in, well, I should, that's too strong of a statement. Very rarely do I run into individuals that are struggling with incident command, tactics, techniques on how to do things. I mean, I'm out there teaching, and so usually I get to see, like through forcible entry and through ventilation and all the groups that I teach with, like we're helping them get a little bit better skill set, but they're willing to do the work and they understand it. Where we struggle in leadership is dealing with people. And that is, it's not just in the fire service. It's in the military. It's in the corporate world. And so most of the problems we discuss have to do with this individual is doing this, or, I've got this problem on my shift, or my battalion chief doesn't want input, and a lot of these things that we can't change. I mean, you can't necessarily, we talk about leading up, and that is a form of followership. And so like, how can you help influence your supervisor in a certain direction? 10 pounds of pressure 100% of the time. That's how you do it. But it's a slow process. And a lot of the times it's, hey, I've got this firefighter on my company. Well, when you're the leader, you have a little bit more control on how you can adjust things, and you can adapt to things. But generational gap comes up all the time. And to your point, what you said earlier, is like, there is always a new generation coming, and it's the influence of the world and the things that we have no control over. And, the greatest generation, basically, during World War II, when when the next generation was coming, they probably looked at them and like, oh my God. Well, that generation was the ones that raised us as Gen Xers, right? And if anything, that generation, some of the mistakes that they made was they gave us trophies. They told us we were number one, right? And so it's just like the generational issues that we deal with. That becomes one of the things, or definitely one of the things we talk about often in Young Officers on Fire.
That's got to be a great way to talk about development. You know, they've had all the training probably before they even stepped foot in one of your meetings, but now they're getting developed. They've been given all the ingredients to bake the cake. Now you're going to teach them how to bake that cake.
Yeah, rarely do we have somebody that's 2 years on the job. It's mostly individuals that are like 8 years on the job. They're wanting to be a company officer, or they're a company officer looking at being a battalion chief. And like for our conference in May, that's what we've done. We've created a firefighter, a company officer, and a battalion track. And it's not how to be a better firefighter in the firefighter track. It's how to be ready for the next level to go up to CO or company officer. Same thing for the company officer track, trying to prepare them to be better, candidate for battalion chief. And the battalion chiefs, one, how to be a good battalion chief, but also how to be a good chief officer should you want to promote outside of being battalion chief. So, the influence that we have is over a group of individuals that have some experience in the fire service. To your point about the development, it's like they've got a lot of training. Now they just need to be developed.
It reminds me of there's this one video on YouTube. I like to run. I'm kind of a runner. So one day I was just looking at different things, and I saw this one. It was a marathon. I couldn't tell you where it was at or who these two guys were, but I was at the end of it. Matter of fact, I think it was a triathlon. Anyway, the guy that's winning it blows past the number two. And the number two is having physical problems. I guess he's starting to get rhabdo. His body's not cooperating. Well, the guy, all he had to do, he had two options: ignore number two, who was having the physical problems, but he kept pushing forward. But there's no way he was going to make the finish line as close as it was. His one option could be, or his other options could be, he could finish the race and win, ignore him. He could win the race, come back real quick to help the guy cross. Or what he did, I think, is just the perfect analogy for leadership. He helped the guy across the line. He didn't worry about himself winning. He didn't worry about whether he was going to get one or two. He saw someone in need and he helped him. So for me, leadership, again, I'm a very visual person. It's like when you climb up a hill. To me, a leader fights that obstacle. Once he gets up top, he doesn't look around. He immediately turns around to help the guy below. Hey, come on, let me help you up here now, and then we'll go together. And I feel like there's always been that place in leadership, in training and development, that has been missing. This sounds like that's exactly what that is. It's taken everything you've done up to this point and where you want to go. It's that middle ground. And it seems like there's a lot of educated people there that are sharing what they know, which our job is sharing knowledge. Knowledge is to be shared in the fire service. It's not, if you don't share your knowledge, it's just a currency for you to use to get what you want. So I love the idea of this. And, I don't mean to tie this in so well, but you kind of brought it up. You brought up, without even knowing it, you brought up your Fire X talk and you brought up the fools, tied it in. So in your Fire X talk, one of the things I'm a student of emotional intelligence. I love reading everything I can on it. I'm obsessed with it. And even back in 2018, you were talking about it in the fire. Nobody talks about it in the fire service. And when I was watching that, I didn't know emotional intelligence at the time. I was like, what's he talking about? Didn't think nothing about it. But now I know. And I was like, oh my God. So I can see that tying right into young officers on fire, as well as you brought up your guest speaker tonight, Flegel, I believe, from the Fools. Now, the Fools this seems to me to be sort of a Fools officer development kind of thing, because you have a speaker at the beginning of the meeting. You all get together, you share a passion to improve yourself, improve the fire service. So I kind of am seeing your experience with the Fools kind of bleeding over into your young officers on fire. Am I wrong? If I'm wrong, let me know. I've been married twice, so I have been wrong before.
No, there's a lot of overlap. I mean, I could say that my career would not be what it is today if it wasn't for the Fools. I remember the training that I was at when I first learned of the Fools, and it was pre 9/11. And after 9/11, the Fools basically blew up. There was a lot of firefighters that wanted to be a part of the brother sisterhood, but before 9/11, my driver and I, Chad Berg, we were in a class, roof ventilation. And I remember Kevin Trost was his name. He was a captain with Sac City. And we were on this probably 1950s motel apartment building. So kind of like the it was just a sloping roof. It wasn't anything steep or anything. It had pea gravel on it, conventional construction. This is the truckee of me coming out. And before we started the roof operations, Captain Trost said, how many of you here are fools? I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Fools. And he's like, well, I'll tell you what, we'll discuss this after training, in the pub tonight, if, for those of you that don't know about the fools. Well, at that pub, we got to find out that this group of individuals, the fools started in 1995, but this group of individuals from all across the nation, they were the best of the firefighters. I mean, every great firefighter, and I get the time, I was a company officer, but all of these great leaders, they were all fools. They were in the fools organization. And they were into the job. They were into training. They were into traditions of the fire service. They did a lot of, they tied to a lot of the line of duty deaths. They studied line of duty deaths. And so I'm like, these are my people. This is what I truly believe in. And so after 9/11, I had been trying to get into the Fools in 2001, but I finally found out that there was a Fools chapter here in Seattle called the Puget Sound Fools, and started in 2002. And the connection, just like most of the guys I'm teaching with are Fools or have been Fools, or a lot of them teach for Fools organizations on a regular basis. The Fools are tied to training. A lot of these conferences that are out there, they're Fools. They're organized by Fools chapters and hosted by Fools chapters. Young Officers on Fire. Ryan is a Fools member. Many of us in Young Officers on Fire are Fools members. There's several chapters in the state of Washington, which go back to why is there so many great firefighters in the state of Washington or in the Puget Sound areas. We're rich with Fools chapters in the Pacific Northwest. I think state of Washington has 6 or 7. Idaho has 4 or 5.
Wow.
So the Fools have been a huge impact in my life. I was e-board member in my chapter early on, and then I was asked by the founders to become one of the e-board members on the international. And so in 2013, I became the training trustee, filling in for the outgoing training trustee. Maybe you heard of Mike Dugan. So
yes.
Yeah, you talk about big shoes to fill. But yeah, so I became the training trustee, and I stayed in that position for a long period of time. And then in this last year, we created a new position in the international, and they're the regional reps. And so there's, I can't remember how many regions, 7 or 8 regions. But I'm the Western region, so I've got all the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, Hawaii, and Australia.
Wow.
So I think I got 45 chapters in my region.
And you make sure that they fly you to these places every month, right? To make sure they're doing their job.
Well, that's what I told them. I said, hey, I want to find out what my budget is for going to Australia and Hawaii. But no, I mean, just the Fools have had a huge impact in my life. And I'm wearing a Fools shirt right now, as a matter of fact. But
nice.
I don't, even after I retire here in a few months, I'm still going to be a part of the Fools, and I'm still going to be, trying to move the ball forward in the American Fire Service to make it the best that it can be.
That's it. I mean, that's why you're, in my opinion, one of the landscapers, man. You're pushing. You're not just doing for you. You're doing for all of us. Now, so there's a Fools chapter here. I used to be way more involved, and I'm not, only because I'm super lazy, right? That is the main reason. I'm not going to lie. I'm just 7 o'clock rolls around at night. I look at that. I'm like, I'm watching TV. I'm like, I sure am warm and toasty. So that's on me. 2024, I've got a couple of this podcast is one of them, things that I'm working on improving. And my relationship with the Fools chapter, my goal for January, and you can check back next year, and my goal for 2024 is to make every single Fools chapters meeting. So that's my new goal. So you can be my accountability buddy and check in every now and then. But here's what I want you to do. I would like you to tell people that are listening that are not part of a Fools chapter why they should join a Fools chapter, because I think there's so much value in it, but I think you'd be way better at telling them than me. A guy that's failed making meeting after meeting. So please.
Why to join the Fools? Well, I would say one, it's not for everybody, and contrary to what some chiefs and those believe about the Fools, it's not just a drinking establishment. I can hang out with firefighters anywhere that are not Fools, and just in general, firefighters enjoy partaking in good beer and whiskey and stuff. Contrary to the belief, Fools are not anti-women. There's a lot of women in the Fools, and you hear oftentimes it's like the brotherhood. And I can't speak to the idea that why they just a lot of them call it just a brotherhood. It's been around that way for a long time, but I maybe it's from the region that I'm from, but I always say the brother and sisterhood. Mm-hmm. But it is a brother and sisterhood, connecting like-minded individuals that are into tradition, and doesn't, again, contrary to what some people believe, it doesn't mean that we're not willing to change. Now, a good traditional helmet, leather helmet, I think is great. Nice. It looks great, but is it the most? Is it the most? Is it the best helmet for some of our operations? Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not the one that's going to make that decision. I do work in a department that has the California style, which is hilarious. LAFD just went away from that California style helmet, and they went to the traditional style. But my department uses a California style helmet. It doesn't matter the helmet that you wear, but generally speaking, the Fools are about tradition and just understanding where we came from and utilizing that to help us move forward. We always remember brothers and sisters that gone before us, have made the ultimate sacrifice. And I know that the elected officials, everybody wants to be zero line of duty deaths. Well, it will never happen. It will never happen. But that doesn't mean that we can't, have that as a goal and always do things to limit the amount of line of duty deaths that we have. I mean, I think we've done a great job when you look at what the fire service was like in the 60s and 70s and where we're at today. And, we don't go on as many fires that we do, but we go on way more incidents that we do. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot more reasons that firefighters are killed today, outside of the fire than there are inside the fire statistically. So just, trying to just make sure that we take care of one another. And like I said, the Fools are not for everybody. You don't have to go to every single meeting. It's kind of like a mindset. It's a lifestyle that you buy into. And I live in Vegas and I work in the state of Washington, and I don't go to, I can't even tell you the last chapter meeting that I went to of the Puget Sound Fools, but I'm still a member of the Puget Sound Fools. My problem as I retire and live here in Vegas, Nevada had one chapter, and now I don't even think that they're an active chapter. So there are no chapters here in Nevada. So maybe that's something I got to take on. But the Fools are great. They're tied to a lot of training, and I would tell you that if you were to pick five members that you really look up to and you think are really good at, good instructors, good teachers in the nation, I guarantee you a couple of them are going to be Fools.
Oh, absolutely. Now, how do they find out? Now you stirred somebody. They're listening to this. They're like, you know what? I want to start a Fools chapter or join a Fools chapter. How are they going to find out? Where to go? Where do they go?
Yeah, go to foolsinternational.com, and on the website there, you can see about local chapters, and so you can find out if there's a chapter in your area. And then if there's not, really, it doesn't take much to create a chapter. You just need to have a small e-board, 3 or 4 people. I can't remember exactly what the articles of association say, but 3 or 4 people, you can create your own board, and then you can create your own chapter. Dave Dabowski is the secretary of the International, and he's out of the Missouri area. And in fact, he's the president of the Muddy River Fools, which they'll tell you they're probably the best chapter in all of the International. But I would argue that there are definitely some really good. They are a good chapter, but But you would end up talking with Dave Dabowski, and he would help line you up. But foolsinternational.com, check it out.
All right. Now, we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to ask you something. You have spent most of your life on a truck, or your career in a truck, which you're very articulate and educated and seem to be well read. So I cannot reconcile that. You clearly seem like an engine guy, but
you're giving me a lot of credit, and I am an engine guy. Go ahead. I'll let you ask your question.
All right. And you're a battalion chief, right? So now you've gone from being in charge of your company to in charge of a crew. I kind of like to pick a little bit of a fight sometimes with this conversation because I have a unique look on it. Now, I'm not a truck. I've been on the truck. Whatever it takes to be a great truckie is not me. I love being on an engine. I like stretching lines. I like making medical runs. So that's my disclaimer. I fully admit I'm not good at the truck, but I have noticed over several years, I started paying attention that more and more departments are defaulting to vertical ventilation, putting 2 people up on there. And I'm talking about default. I'm not saying they necessarily need it, right? So my question is this. Here's my fight I want to pick. For departments with smaller resources, smaller departments, what is your thought on taking those 2 people? Because there's NFPA 1700. I know NFPA can be a dirty word, but 1700 is a fantastic standard. It's the standard of a guide to the basic firefighting. They mention 8 different types based on research of ventilation. So it seems to me, nothing against vertical ventilation. If it's needed, it's needed, flat out, no argument. What about getting those 2 guys off a roof, though, and putting them inside, searching for victims and helping to move hose if they have to make those interior situations a little more tenable? What are your thoughts on that as a truckie and now a battalion chief?
Well, I'm going to answer this engine thing real quickly. One, when I was in the training division, I was the one that helped bring in smoothbore nozzles and bulk beds to my department, and I was coming from the truck. So I feel pretty comfortable with the engine side of things. And my department, we had a quint, so I still had to be somewhat, versed in engine operations, even though we were heavier on the truck side of things than we were on the engine. But so I feel comfortable speaking engine to you. You probably can't speak both, so I'm bilingual, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I cannot speak truckie to you. I can't.
The whole idea of, well, first of all, let's back up and let me support the engine guys.
Okay.
The fire doesn't go out with water. If you don't have any water, you're not putting the fire out. So you got to have water. You got to have engines. And so the majority of the departments, probably across the nation, only have engine companies. And so how their operations go is a lot of the truck functions that would be traditionally, which again, when we look at these books were written from the urban mindset. I mean, when you look at some of these individuals that had written some of these truck books, they're in these large urban departments. Mittendorf is probably the one that from the West Coast that got used a lot in our area, and he retired out as a battalion chief. But Chief Mittendorf was in the LAFD. It's in one of the top 5 biggest departments in the nation. So his perspective on truck operations is different than the perspective on the greater portion of the American Fire Service, which is probably 2-3 station departments, all engine companies. And so the actual completing the task of search and forcible entry and all those skills that traditionally fall under the truck, they were being done by engine companies. So I would say, first of all, you have to have somewhat of a truck mindset, understanding those and being good at those skills. And if you're in that smaller organization with limited resources, you've got to have those skills no matter what. Now, when we're getting into vertical ventilation, I would say that is a skill for, not a beginner. It's novice to expert. And what I mean by that is not that just that you have to be well skilled in it, but your organization has to be able to support it. And that is in resources. So if you are that small department, the likelihood of putting 2 guys on the roof to ventilate it. I mean, I'll even give you a 1-story house, 1-story dwelling. So it's pretty easy for them to get up there, fairly easy for them to get up there. You probably will be better served by having 2 guys on a hose line, 1 guy pumping, somebody in command, and if you want to call it that, 2 individuals searching, and another 2 individuals either on a backup line or supporting that. And that is bread and butter, just as low as it's going to get, and no vertical ventilation. But what I will say is departments that are larger and that have more resources and they have truck companies, be it that they're Quints or, true dedicated trucks, you should be very good, very, comfortable with vertical ventilation. And one of the challenges that I'm faced with in teaching this and being a part of the roof pervs and the highwaymen and other organizations that I teach with is the whole idea of what some people call lightweight. I call it engineered, but engineered construction, and that, you can't go on a roof that's engineered, constructed. And I just call bullshit again. It's just a different environment, because if the LAFD and a lot of the departments that are on the West Coast that have a lot of engineered constructed buildings, they're fighting fire. We're fighting fire in them all the time, and we're on them all the time. It's just, you just got to be better suited and understand understand the environment that you're playing on. What's your battlefield, right? It's just a little bit different. So, is vertical ventilation effective? Absolutely, it's effective. But I would even say, and now as an organization, and we're a 10 station department with 1.5 ladder trucks. It is not a default that our ladder truck goes with the roof and does ventilation. But it is something that they're very comfortable with. And it's very easy for me as a battalion to put them in that position, because, with the resources that I'm sending to a fire on a residential, we are 4 engines, a truck, 2 chiefs, and a couple of medic units. Gives me enough resources to be able to do all of that and still do vertical ventilation. But vertical ventilation is not the default. We're heavy on the search. It just, the way that my region is working, we only typically have 1 ladder truck, and it's the staffing on a ladder truck is 3. So they either got to be they can split. And so you could have 2 doing search and the driver staying out and doing, secondary egress with ground ladders or additional forcible entry or horizontal ventilation. Or if they're going to do vertical ventilation, typically, it's not 1, it's 2 on the roof. And so that pretty much makes it a company. So they're all out for ventilation. So we don't have the ability to be able to split like some truck companies do that are 4 and 5 or 6 person trucks. To be able to say, we got some going on the inside to search and some going outside to do ground ladder work and maybe VES and maybe vertical ventilation. I don't have that. But so what I do is we have extra engine companies. And so an engine company is very comfortable with searching and very comfortable with forcible entry and very comfortable with ground ladders. And so they fill that gap for me as a battalion chief.
So when you switched over to battalion chief and started watching other people do vertical ventilation as opposed to you being on the roof, was it an easy transition for you? Like, okay, these guys got it, or did you go, I would do it a little different, or I would probably do it this way?
Yeah, this is just, it's a natural feeling for everybody that is moving up through the ranks so like when I did it, we were better at it. This goes back to the generation. Right?
When you did it was better. Okay.
Yeah. When I went to the academy, we were tougher. When I was a firefighter, and we fought more fire. The list goes on and on. But I will say that when you promote up, you're always looking back and going, man, and it's a lot easier, especially when, I worked on the ladder truck for 17 years, almost 20 years. And so I had a lot of, I feel comfortable doing truck operations and had a lot of opportunities, through my career and teaching it. You learn from teaching, you learn from watching other students. You can anticipate, that they're going to do something wrong. All of these things. And so I felt, I feel really comfortable. I should say back when I was on the ladder truck, it's been 8 years now. I haven't been on the ladder truck. Back then I felt very comfortable. Now as a battalion chief, and this is one of the challenges with leadership, is you've got to trust your people, and what I go back to is that whole mentoring and developing firefighters, if I brought my firefighters up correctly,
Mhm.
and I gave them the ability to be able to think on their own, and I guided them, I didn't tell them what to do, and I let them make their mistakes, and I helped correct their mistakes, and I let them continue to do those things, and I gave them the opportunity to lead. Then when I leave and I go to the next level and they bump up to that company officer level, they're ready to go. And so, the company officer on my ladder truck, he was my fireman, and we did some pretty cool shit together back when he was a firefighter. And yeah, I'm totally confident in their ability to be able to do things. But I will say that it's oftentimes the longer that you're separated from it, the more you start going, oh, man, I don't know. But here's what I will say is that a good battalion chief, a good incident commander will put their people in the position. Well, one, you hope your people are well trained, but will put their people in the position where they're going to be able to say, hey, we can't do this. And if I send the ladder to the roof, and I don't care how much fire is coming from the building, but I send them to the roof, they get up there and they make the determination like, hey, this is no go. They're going to tell me it's no go. All right, no problem. Because I know they're not going to go, well, Fisher sent us up here. We're up here to die. We're going to, fall in with the roof and blah, 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 blah. And so, but it's only natural to have that feeling of like, oh, because you don't have that control. Think of it, if you have kids, it was real easy for you to drive. And then all of a sudden when you're driving with them, you're like, and then
you think there's a brake on your side?
Yeah. You're like, okay, go ahead. Here's the keys. See you later. Yeah. It's uncomfortable, and then you start to get comfortable as they prove to you, but if you don't give them opportunities to do those things, if you don't give them those opportunities, they're never going to be able to prove to you that they're ready for, the next level. And so, yeah, it does get challenging at times. But here's the other thing I would say. And again, when I'm teaching classes with young officers on fire, we talk a lot about leadership. I spend a lot of time talking about from the focus of battalion chief. One of the biggest mistakes I see of battalion chiefs, shift battalions, is that they don't train with their crews. They don't go out and train with their crews because, I've got to take care of staffing. I've got to do this. And, I've got all these administrative duties I need to do. Well, the problem with that is that you lose because, go back to your masking up, and we're talking about putting our gear on. Mm-hmm. I don't put my gear on as much as I used to because I don't go on nearly the amount of calls that require my gear. And I don't mask up, I mask up quarterly and during drills and, because I got all these other things. You start to lose that comfort, that skill set, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the same is true about the tempo of the fire ground. And a good BC needs to understand the tempo of their firefighters, needs to understand how long it takes their engine companies to stretch line. What are the challenges that they face? What are the challenges that the ladder company is facing with ground ladder work or with aerial ops? Or, the truck is different. The truck that I worked on primarily the aerial was much faster than, meaning the aerial operations were much faster than the truck that we have today. That slows everything down. So if you're not out training with your crews as a battalion, you lose the ability to understand what the fire ground tempo is. And there's been a number of battalions that have said, hey, give me a defensive strip cut or a trench cut, whatever the terminology you want to use, on a strip mall. And they think that you can do that in 5 minutes. Well, it's because they have either they didn't work on a ladder truck or they've been off the ladder truck so long that they don't know, what it really takes to do that. In our world, at the command post, is we think things are running faster than what they really are. Yeah. So without proper training, you don't know where you need to work with your crews and where you need to give them more space, where you can give them more space themselves, and so like, well, yeah, I'm totally confident in them to be able to do this and just understanding the fire ground tempo.
Yeah, that's great. I want to go back to what you said about lightweight construction and putting people on the roof for that. Yes, I agree. I could argue with you that that's when we need to do it the most. That's when we have less time. And if we're there to save them, then we got to get up on there. If that is a tactic that we're going to do, we need to be able to get up there and telling people like this entire type of construction is off limits for vertical ventilation, when that's all that's being made and has been, the only thing has been made for many, many years. I think we're doing a disservice to the firefighters, and more importantly to our community. Yeah. It's lightweight construction, whatever, get up there, do it right. That's just more reason to learn your job better. I've always said, if you put a gun to my head and said you can only teach two things in the fire service for the rest of your life, it would be fire behavior and building construction. I think those two things alone, if you can really study those, you'll know if you should get on that roof or not, whether it's balloon frame, whether it's lightweight construction, doesn't matter, right? So I agree with you totally on that. Also, I believe vertical ventilation is one of the most critical and dangerous things we can do. When it's needed, let's get it done. And let's get it done quick. That's not the time to learn that skill. But vertical ventilation, like so many other things in the fire service, starts before the fire. If you don't position your trucks right, if you got a fast aerial, a fast stick that you can move over, if maybe it's a little questionable, but you still need it, you could use, your aerial. But if you got engines blocking, that's no good. Communication, right? That's the time. I mean, you don't want to open up a roof if the guys inside aren't ready. So you got to have that communication. There's so many other aspects to vertical ventilation, I think, that it's more than just cutting a hole. It's so much more than just cutting a hole. That's the end result. And it's an amazing, amazing thing. I've recently learned, though, from people I've talked with, that the 4x4 hole there's no science behind a 4x4 hole. Did you know that?
Yeah. There's, I think what we've always taught and is like, where did the 4x4 hole come from? And I think it just comes from just the dimensional spacing of rafters. In this case, if it's lightweight or engineered construction, you look at it, it's 24 on center. So when you do one single louver, it's a 4x, and then you just make it 4x4. And some say, well, sheets of plywood or OSB or whatever they're using to sheet it, it's 4x8. You're cutting a 4x. Like, you don't know where you're at in where the seams are and all that kind of stuff. But
right.
But you're right. There's no science behind the 4x4 hole. But what I will say in my experience and with a lot of teaching and watching what UL has said is, like, typically what we do when we are in an offensive position doing vertical ventilation is we continue to cut until we make an impact. And so what we would teach before was, if the smoke coming out of your ventilation hole is under pressure, just keep on making until
right.
there's no longer pressure.
Right.
And now what we've been teaching, and what a lot of the officers are teaching on, on the ladder truck or what they're using, is they're looking to see, what's the smoke look like coming out the front door. Mm-hmm. So if they're in a position where they can see, is smoke still coming out the front door, then continue making the hole bigger, and so they're kind of weighing that between the amount of pressure that's coming out of the hole and what's going on in the occupied area. Because in engineered construction, there's a lot of space, the attic space. Some people, East Coast might call it a cock loft, mm-hmm. but the space, especially in engineered construction, can be filled with a lot of wood. And so you could have a tremendous amount of pressure coming from your hole, but none, because the fire that was in maybe the occupied structure had moved up into the void space, and now right. it's running the void space. So if I've cut a hole big enough that there's no smoke left in the, inside the occupied area, now the attack team, the engine companies, they can advance through the fire real easily. They can search real easily. I mean, all of these things that make their job easier. And if we're about life, that's what it's all about. And then they can apply water to where it needs to be. And, then we could spend 2 hours talking about vertical ventilation and ventilation, but, and how do you vent attic fires and all these things, but because there's so many different approaches. But you're right. I mean, vertical ventilation is a very effective tool if done right. Mm-hmm. And the challenge is that, when we're talking about engineered buildings, I would say that on a single family dwelling, it's not as crucial as it is on larger commercial buildings, vertical ventilation. And I would also say that my experience has been that you're making a hole big enough that you're making an impact on the roof. Typically what that turns into, and there's two terms here, trench cut and defensive strip cut. It just depends on the building construction. Mm-hmm. But if I were to strip it, which is what I'm trying to do when I'm up there on a commercial building, I'm trying to make the hole, and I'm moving it I'm moving it so that I'm going from wall to wall. So from Alpha to Charlie, so that I can cut it off, basically. So I'm utilizing that and trying to cut it off at the same time. That's pretty much what you're seeing is, one of the benefits of vertical ventilation is stop fire spread. It's not, and I don't want this to come off wrong, but it does lift the smoke in the occupied area. But when we're talking about engineered construction, what we're trying to do more, in my opinion, is we're trying to stop its lateral spread. So, so it doesn't keep on going. And back to your point earlier, when you said, if there's two things that I could teach firefighters, fire behavior and building construction, I tell that to my company officers all the time. If you want to be really good at being a company officer, understand fire behavior, understand people too, because it's about leadership, but understand fire behavior and understand building construction. And what separates the ladder company officer from the engine company officer, what makes us better, if you want to say that,
high school diploma,
is what makes us better is that we understand building construction better. And typically the engine officers don't really have to worry about building construction. They worry about, being able to stretch a line. They worry about fire behavior. But from the truck side of things, we're sizing the building up from its construction. And when we go to the roof, we're sizing it up on its building construction. So we have a greater understanding of building construction than most do. And then I even tell my company officers that want to be battalion chiefs is that I think the best battalion chiefs, and it's not because I was on the ladder truck, but I think the best battalion chiefs, the ones that are more equipped, are the ones that spent some time on a ladder truck. And because it changes your focus of, your focus has to change a little bit, and understanding second means of egresses and when you need them and where they need to be and how they're going to go with the fire ground. That's something that I'm making the decision as a company officer when I was working on the ladder truck, or when we need to ventilate versus when we shouldn't ventilate, those types of things. So it makes for a better battalion chief. And, and I've talked to Ray McCormick about this from the FDNY. And there's only one department that I know that requires their battalion chiefs to be captains on a ladder truck, and that's the LAFD. Now, there might be other departments that are out there, but, the FDNY, you could work on an engine your entire career, test for battalion, and be a battalion. And Chicago and all of those organizations. But in the in the LAFD, Captain 1 is on an engine, Captain 2 is on a ladder truck. And so you have to be a Captain 2 to make battalion chief. So all of those battalions in the LAFD have been, at some point, for some duration of time, have had to work on a ladder truck. And so it gives them a better understanding. Now, so your listeners, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great battalion chiefs out there that never were, on the ladder truck. But I would argue that when you do work on a really good ladder truck and a department that has a really good ladder culture, you're probably better equipped as a battalion chief when you've worked on the truck and an engine.
I would agree. I think I always bust balls on truckies. That's what I live for. Well, our mutual friend Snodgrass said it best. He said, truckies are the gentlemen of the fire service. They open the door for firefighters. But no, I honestly, if I go back, if I had to be 100% honest, some of the best battalion chiefs I've ever worked for were truckies. And they did understand building construction. They did understand fire behavior. And I'm of the, I think that, you should be able to go to any crew battalion chief, crew major, anybody, and they should be able to give you on the spot a building construction class and an up-to-date fire behavior class, because they should know that stuff like the back of their hand. So I totally agree with you. It's all, people like to go for the fun stuff, forcible. I love forcible entry, don't get me wrong, but people sometimes will focus on the more hands-on kind of cool shit. I know I did, right? Oh, the baseball bat swing and for the forcible. But some of the stuff that people might describe as less interesting, building construction, right? Fire behavior. It really, it's the foundation your entire house is built on, is those two things. And so maybe after you're done out in the bay, forcing your prop door over and over, maybe, get a Brannigan book and learn a little bit about building construction. It's an area I struggled with. I struggled a great deal with building construction to the point where I had Brannigan and all that stuff, but it took me a long time. Finally, I decided I'm going to teach a class on it. It forced me to learn the subject. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I did it. But I totally agree. I really think that battalion chiefs, I'll even go as far as to say, chief of personnel or chief of operations, I mean, chief of the department. I think some of the best ones there have done a lot of truck work because they understand it's just a different animal than engine work. There's a mental aspect too with it. You're a little less worried when you got a hose and 185 gallons right there ready to go, as opposed to, all right, guys, the line's going this way, but the bedroom, we got to go over here without a hand line. Don't forget your water can. So I totally agree, but I will forever bust on truckies. I can't imagine one of them will ever be at my funeral, but hey, what are you going to do? I would like to ask you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll just say real quickly, Brannigan was the book that I used in college, and it's the one that everybody uses for the most part. And it's a reference, but there's a lot of good information that's out there, and I think one of the things that separates East Coast and West Coast is because the West Coast has more engineered construction. Basically, at least I'm going to speak from my region. It's natural to fear what you don't understand. And so we get in these battles between, should they be up on this roof or not? And we can slice it from so many different angles. But I think as firefighters, when we discuss building construction, a lot of East Coast firefighters are not very comfortable with engineered construction. And so it creates this, well, we're not going to do it. And if you're and that's a great position to be. If you're not going to understand it, then you probably shouldn't do it, because that's how you're going to get into trouble. But we fear the things that we don't understand. And I mean, this next thing that's coming, or it's been around for a long time, but it's mass timber construction, and they can build high rises with just wood.
Yeah.
Well, some firefighters are losing their shit about this. And it's just because we don't understand how that they build these mass timber buildings. And so, I mean, understanding building construction, the other book out there that I enjoy and that I recommend is The Art of Reading Buildings by Dodson and Mittendorf, which is a great book. It kind of connects the old traditional kind of Brannigan book to some of the newer things, newer construction, and it utilizes Mittendorf's background with LAFD and their aggressive truck culture and understanding building construction. So, if there was one thing that I would tell, and I've said it in recruit training before, it's like you really should understand building construction to be a firefighter, and you need to understand fire behavior.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. When I was very fortunate to teach up at the Rock at FDNY twice. The first time I went there, Chief Lieb showing us everything, and there were these little sheds all over the Rock, all over their training grounds. And he told us, I should say, he said they don't do it anymore, but they used to make their recruits build these little sheds. And there's like electrical, and I mean, I don't think they actually work, but they stub stuff out and stuff. So there's these little sheds all over the Rock. Now they use them for everything. And I don't think but the whole point was to teach hands-on building construction. What better way? And I thought that was brilliant. I come from a smaller department now, 5 stations, we have like 80 people, but I always thought, man, that would be the coolest thing to have every group build a shed, whether you have any skill on it or not. What better way to learn building construction than knowing what on center means and knowing about where the stub outs are and OSB versus plywood, all the stuff. But yeah, if you look, and now I might have been told that some of the chiefs in FDNY have very similar sheds in their backyard at home. I don't know. I can't swear to that. That might have been a joke.
Well, this goes to that the generational gap thing. I mean, we're now getting recruits or individuals that join the fire service, and you're like, hey, grab me the Phillips screwdriver, and they're like, Phillips screwdriver? Grab me a flathead or standard. Is that the plus or the minus?
Yeah.
And the reality is that, it's just the world is changing. And so the idea that firefighters, when they were, when you were joining the fire service in the 1950s, you probably did construction because, firefighters didn't make much money. And so you had to do something on the side. Well, it was an easy thing to do because construction, you can do it on your own time, in between shifts. And so they became very skilled laborers when it came to construction. They understood building construction, and then they started pulling in buddies that were in construction, like, man, you'll make a great firefighter. Well, that's not happening today,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we have to do something different to understand building construction. And to your point about Chief Lieb and at the Rock, there's a lot of recruit academies that require their recruits to build a small building.
That's so
So
cool.
they understand. Well, they understand. What does it mean to have studs and the spacing of studs and the rafters and the trusses and what's what's the run of a roof, the run and rise and all of this stuff that you're just like, you would think that it would just be, it's just information that's known, but it's not. And so if they don't do it in the academy, then they won't necessarily understand it. And I will a plug for James Johnson, he's part of the Roof Pervs with us from Canada. He's doing a class at firemanship in this next year, and I believe he's doing it with Barry, who's out of San Jose, and they're doing a building construction class and building a building so you can understand it. So at firemanship, I don't know that it's full or not. It may be, but
that's awesome.
Check it out.
Yeah. I've had captains talk about going back to generational and adding it to what we're talking about. I've had captains come to me after I've released recruits into the wild in their pro year, and they'll say, this guy he's never used a chainsaw, dude. What am I supposed to do with him? I'm like, teach him. Matter of fact, it's better that he hasn't used a chainsaw because you can tell him the right way to do it, the way you want to do it. But complaining about what they don't know versus teaching them, I mean, come on, right? Like my dad was a plumber, so I grew up around tools and everything, but I never used a chainsaw. And when I was in the military and they were doing that, you've never used a chainsaw? I'm like, I've never been a lumberjack, bro. I don't know what to tell you, man. How about you show me how to use it? And they did, and they were cool about it. But the
same would be true about hose lines and bunker gear and
right
SCBAs. I don't care if they've used every saw in the world and they built buildings and everything else. It's like, we show them how to stretch a hose line. We show them how to flow a hose line. They didn't get that skill before because how would they have, unless they were, an explorer or cadet, as a teenager, right? Or what is our gear? How do you put it on? All that kind of stuff. Is like, we have to show them a lot of things. Now, if you're struggling with the idea that you got to show somebody how to use a saw, or it is today's world. Guess what? They're going to show you how to use an app on a phone.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a give and take. Yes. Probably each generation you lose something from the previous generation, but you also gain one or two things. And I've tried to teach that to some people that like, oh yeah, okay, fine. But you always struggle just getting your email. You realize this guy gets his email on his phone and his watch. You might want to, there's a trade-off there. So totally agree. Let me ask you something. I got two more questions. One is for everybody that's listening, both people, where can they find you? If they want more information on Rob Fisher, if they want to take a class from Rob Fisher, how are they going to find you?
YoungOfficersOnFire.com has got connection with all the classes that we teach there. Rob Fisher 72, Instagram. It used to be called Twitter. Now it's called X, I guess. And robfisher72@gmail.com is my email. My phone number is 425-870-0129. You can call me, text me.
Wow.
I just Brothers in Battle. I don't have I'm on Brothers in Battle cadre, but I don't have my own individual stuff there. Roof Pervs. You can go to our page on that and Facebook and Instagram. And then occasionally I'm out with the Highwaymen, which is another group just teaching truck operations, ventilation primarily. And so sometimes I'm out there with those guys.
So you're not hard to find. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I'm usually somewhere all the time. I go to a lot of conferences. I'm very fortunate that being affiliated with, County Fire Tactics and Brothers in Battle and Young Officers on Fire and the Fools, I probably go to. I mean, the only person I know that goes more conferences than me is probably Kyle Romagus, Corley Moore. Well, Cody Trustrell is retired now, so he's doing a lot more. But I'm at a lot of conferences, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. Have the availability. I mean, I have a superstar for a wife. She's been behind this the entire time, and so she lets me go and do these things. A lot of times I bring her along with, and so she's
nice.
at a lot of the functions. Yeah, she's at a lot of the functions that I'm at. But I think I've done 3 conferences in the last 2 months, and then I've got a couple conferences that I'm doing at the beginning of the year after Christmas. And then I retire. My last shift is on March 8th, and the following weekend I'll be teaching with Brothers in Battle and on my own with Young Officers on Fire, doing the March Mayhem, which is in Idaho. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things going on.
So you're not going to be just hanging around watching TV on your retirement.
No.
Well, listen, my last question for you, brother. And again, I appreciate your time. I know we went a little bit longer, but I don't get to talk to Rob Fisher very often. So I absolutely milked the shit out of this one. But my last question is this. I like to ask, what's the best firehouse prank that you've ever done or have had played on you?
Well, this one was, we played on, so let me kind of set the stage. Back in the day, we had 2 dispatch centers for our county. And so we were on one dispatch center. And so the other one was for neighboring departments that we would do mutual aid or automatic aid, whatever you want to call it, with. And so the ladder truck, my ladder company, it was an A shift. I remember the shift because we were screwing with the A shift lieutenant. I was on overtime working the neighboring engine company. See, I was on an engine. And we wanted to screw with the guys on the ladder truck. And so we got these new pagers. So this is probably early 2000s would be my guess. We got these new pagers that were digital pagers. So they gave you all the digital information, like the address and all that kind of stuff. We could, through the dispatch software, I could create what looked to be like a page for a call. And so what I thought would be funny, because the lieutenant on A shift was complaining about not having any real work lately, is I like, hey, let's tell them that they're getting dispatched to a commercial fire in the other dispatched area, right? So it wouldn't come through our dispatch center, it would come from the other. Because what would happen is one dispatch center could tell us and preempt us, tell us that you're being requested for a commercial fire or whatever. And then they would contact our dispatch center and you'd have to wait for the dispatch, but you would know that you're going. Sometimes you would get on the call, but then another ladder truck or another company would replace you, right? Mm-hmm. And so so you would never get dispatched, and that just happened every once in a while. So I make up this pretend fire in the other dispatch center. He gets it, and the guys that were at the station, like, you should have seen them. They were like, "Holy shit, we got a fire! It's a commercial job. It's a third alarm," and they're all excited. And what I expected is it was just gonna, just no big deal. Well, he calls our dispatch center over the radio, and he says, "Snowpack, you got a call for ladder 72 on this commercial fire in Snowcom?" "Sorry, ladder 72, we'll have it." And I am freaking out. I'm like trying to send pages. No. So now our dispatch center is looking for this commercial fire that's in a different dispatch center. He then calls the other dispatch center, "Snowcom from ladder 72. We're en route." And they're like, "En route to where?" And now the 2 dispatch centers are confused. And that was all because of me. I mean, it was a great prank, but I got a talking to from the ops chief and my battalion chief about that. So that was my prank against the A shift.
That is awesome. They you know how to get them all wound up. Commercial.
Dude, I felt so bad after that. I mean, I was like, oh, I'm in deep shit now.
See, I think that's the key to a good prank is after the prank, you feel horrible for doing it. Because you're like, oh, dude, I had no idea. Because pranks never go exactly like you thought. They always veer off and just go horribly wrong. So I love it. Brother Fisher, I cannot tell you. This is the first podcast of 2024. I could not ask for a better guest to kick off this year. I've been dying to talk to you. I'm just so happy. This has made my day. When I went up to pee just a little while ago, my wife's up there and I had this big smile on my face and she goes, "Are you done yet?" I said, "No, there's more." It's just, there's so much more. Thank you so much, brother. It's meant the world to me. I hope you have a great Christmas and thank you so much.
Likewise, man. I appreciate being on the show, and I love talking shop. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm going to talk shop. So, I know you said, "Hey, we can talk for about an hour." I said, 2 hours. I don't care. I love talking shop. So it was great to be on the show. Thanks for having me on. Have a good Christmas, and let's try to make the American Fire Service better. So that's it.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to cut it right there. Do you want to do a quick promo? Are you comfortable with that? I don't want you to do anything you're not comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Just go. You go ahead and do whatever you want, and then I'll stop recording, but it won't end our call. It'll just stop recording. Anytime you want.
All right. Hi, this is Rob Fisher. I'm often credited with 10 pounds of pressure 100% of the time. So come and join me on the 3-Point Firefighter. Listen to that story and listen to some other topics on leadership.
Our podcast today was sponsored by Fire Facilities. This Made in America company is dedicated to constructing top quality custom training structures to meet your needs. Make your training count with all steel structures that are made to last. Visit firefacilities.com for more details.